So on the way back, I was brainstorming, and I was thinking about, well, how do I get this plane to be unique? There were ideas, supersonic, vertical takeoff, all of these different ideas. And I thought, look, people are spending billions trying to get supersonic going, and they're not getting it right. Let me look at something else. And I did actually have a dream about this. But what happened was I don't know the relevance of why I was in Japan, but I was driving a car through Japan. I was driving up and down these roads, and eventually I got to this airport, and I had two planes in this airport. One which was reddish maroon, and one blue, navy blue. And I didn't know what, again, the relevance of that. I think I do know now with my logo of my practice is very deep red, and the logo of Pegasus is a deep blue, a navy blue. But the shape was very striking, the way that it looked, and I drew this into a PowerPoint. I made it with PowerPoint, and I animated it with PowerPoint. It was very strange. I still have that PowerPoint. I'll show it to you. But what the final design looks like now, or the design so far, because it will still change a little bit, is almost the same as that little drawing. So it was quite a process to go through.
Dr. Reza Mia, welcome to the Peak Performance Live podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm happy to be here. Excited.
We're excited to have you. Yeah, thanks for taking the time, for coming out.
Always.
And this podcast is about human potential, about inspiring people. And I think you're one of those individuals that can offer a great amount of inspiration. So I just want to talk a little bit about you. You're a medical doctor. You have an advanced diploma in medical aesthetics. You have an MBA. You have a master's in finance. What else? You're a member of Mensa on the board of regenerative medicine. You are training to become a private pilot. And you're the visionary founder of Pegasus Universal Aerospace, which is it looks like the Tesla of aviation, right?
Well, yes, thanks. That's kind of a good nutshell, good summary. There's obviously a few little certificates here and there, but those are the main key points. I like that.
And you're also creative, you're an artist. If I recall, you practice martial arts as well. So how do you balance all of these?
I think it's all part of balance. And it's just about time. It's not that you have to do everything all at once. It's not that every day I'll read and study and practice martial arts and fly and whatever. It's about finding structure, being patient with yourself. And that's kind of how I find the balance. I think when you get too focused on one or other aspect of life, you lose that balance. And it's just about stepping back every now and then and saying, well, what am I neglecting? Where am I falling short? Should I rectify? And then forgiving yourself for doing that and saying, well, actually, I haven't been eating properly the last few weeks. I'm starting to see it. Let me try to fix that. Just to say, well, sometimes you fall off the horse. Just get back on. It doesn't mean that you must give up on trying to do it. And that's what I think is working for me so far.
Is it a process for you of always wanting to learn something new? Is there sort of a reservoir of things that you want to learn about, or does inspiration have to strike and then you immerse yourself into something new?
I think it's a bit of both. If I look around, I have a cupboard at my house full of books that are pending, books that have to be read still. And so it's about when there's time, oh, well, I'm a bit bored now. Actually, I did want to learn about this. Or while we're working, let's say on the plane, I'll say, well, I need to learn now a little bit about the aerodynamics of a fan. So there was a book on aerodynamics. Let me go get that and start reading about that. And it's also about sometimes referencing and saying, well, there's 4 books here and I need to know all about these things. Let me go and start. Sometimes I'll get a pile together and read up those chapters that are relevant. But inspiration does guide you. I do feel like we are obviously on a big journey and we do get guidance. And I sometimes feel like my to-do list is that long. Let me try to prioritize it, but I feel like, something else will guide what has to happen and when it has to happen.
Yeah. So you have the science background, engineering and artistry, and I'm curious how that molds your perspective with work.
Do you know, I think that if you look at most of the things that I'm doing, you can, again, take a step back and look at it and classify it under many of those same elements. So if you look at aesthetic medicine, there's science, there's art, there's an element of engineering. If you look at the plane, obviously there's engineering, but there's also science and there's art and there's aesthetics in both of those things. And it's so, I think it's about just using those parts of your brain and to lean on them when you need to draw inspiration for different elements of the work that you're doing.
Is there a different drive for you to create a very beautiful aesthetic? Because I suppose let's take the plane for example. It could have been configured to work, but I don't think many could have made it as beautiful as you've made it.
You know, the thing is, you have to look at it from an outsider's perspective, the customer. When they want to buy the plane, yes, they're looking for the utility. If you had to sell on a piece of paper, if I said to you, look, you can land anywhere a helicopter could land, but even more places. You could land on the beach if you like, but obviously with clearance. But practically speaking, you could land on the beach. That may be enough. Well, then you can fly at almost 800 kilometers an hour. Okay, well, that's nice. For 6.5 hours. Okay, I'll take one. You know, that's how some people would try to make that purchase. But the idea is people see it landing and they go, what is that? And they get goosebumps and their heart starts beating faster and their eyes dilate and they have no choice but to buy the plane now. And so that's what the beauty and aesthetics can do to a human being. People buy on emotion, you know? It's like they say, you sell the sizzle, not the steak.
Okay.
Obviously the steak must be good because then you'll get them to buy it again. Or they'll keep using the plane and their friends will use the plane. But it's the same with aesthetics, it's the same with the plane. People buy on emotion. You have to get them to value it deeply, psychologically.
And talk about the creative process that drives your inventive process, because it seems there's art in the way that you've created things.
So there are a few inventions on the go, kind of. Some are on the back burner, some are being developed, some are on paper, some are practical. And it is just a process of kind of identifying a problem, number one. Or sometimes it starts with a solution. You think, oh, you know, it might be nice if this existed. And then that's where I feel like there's a bit of guidance, a bit of inspiration. Who knows where that comes from. But the thing is, once you start to practically look at it and then look at existing patents, brainstorming how to solve a process, what are the elements that need to be cleared for this to work. Then from there, when there is something tangible, to start to say, well, what does the market look like? You know, what does the demand look like, the financial feasibility, doing that type of research around it. Because you don't want to make something, you know, the most awesome method of, let's say, copying a cover of a book or something that's, you know, something that people wouldn't want to really pay money for. Maybe that's a bad example because people do sell books. But you know what I mean? There must be something of value that comes out of the process. Otherwise, look, it's nice, but to go through the process, the time, the effort, the thinking, the planning, the building, designing, intellectual property protection, all of that for something that won't really feed back into the process for future inventions is a waste. So, for example, I'm working on something now to deliver babies who are in breech. And I've been looking at this for quite a long time, but it's kind of also been in between different projects and it hasn't progressed as far as I'd like it to. But it is now progressing. And that brings great value. You'll be able to save mothers and their babies from potentially dying. And it's the ones that will be in the rural areas, you know, in the middle of India, Africa, China, where they may not have those access to doctors for Caesars. So breech, for people who don't know, it's when the baby's upside down. What will happen is, if you try to deliver the baby, the cervix will dilate, the baby will descend until the head, which is now the biggest part of the baby, and that will obstruct the umbilical cord, and as it stretches, it'll take too long and the baby will be deprived of oxygen in that time and it can die. If it's never delivered, the mother can also die. But once you're able to create a channel that's big enough, and it's not to stretch the cervix, but simply to mimic the head of the baby, then the cervix will dilate under the pressure of the uterus. So this is great. This is what we want. And it will make a big difference. So we're processing this, and that's the kind of invention I'd like to make. The same with Pegasus, the plane. It'll be a good invention as far as saving time for people who use business jets, who use helicopters. But again, if you think about sea rescue or a ambulance, you need to fly out to sea. There's a range you can get to with a helicopter. Now, if I could say the range would be 4 times and the speed would be 4 times, obviously that makes a very big difference for people who would be stuck out there.
Yeah.
And so that's the additional value that the product can bring.
It's born out of necessity, really.
Exactly.
The technology can support it.
You know, I have this idea that there'll be someone in the future sitting on a boat sinking in the sea, him and his family, they don't know what to do, and you know, they're thinking this is too far for a helicopter to get us, this is it. And the Pegasus can arrive, the VVJ can arrive, fly overhead, pick them up. And that's the kind of future I see for the plane as well. It's exciting. But obviously there's other elements, and there's ways that we can commercialize it so that it can feed back into the process, which is, what we were talking about. But it's to then identify which projects to take forward, in which priority, which ones will bring real value back so that we can continue the project. And then the other thing is to bring and partner with other experts. So for example, working on an injector robot that I'm working on, we now have engineers from robotics that we're working on and pharmaceutical companies that we're now all working together because they obviously have an expertise when it comes to regulations, when it comes to development of the medical side of it. And the engineers are on the robotics and the programming. And so it's silly to try to do it alone. If I did, I would be 60 before the robot
you
would
can't
be
do
done.
it alone. You have to have the support and the expertise in the various fields.
Exactly. It's about just getting some of the right partners together.
To make your journey more seamless,
and more exponential. I think otherwise it's like linear. There's only so far you can go. Once you've got other people with you, you can expand quite nicely.
So let's talk about anti-aging art and your day-to-day operations. Explain to the viewers what you do.
Anti-aging art is my company. It's something that I made to be able to bring medical aesthetics and therapy together. So injectables, those types of things, botulinum toxins, dermal fillers, that is all under me. But I've got therapists who work with machines and with different types of treatments, less invasive treatments. And anti-aging art then is allowed to market certain things in a way that I can't when it comes to the medical treatment. So we obviously have to stick to the ethical guidelines, the rules of the HPCSA. And for example, we're not allowed to advertise prices when it comes to the injectables. We can't really shove brand names into people's faces. That's why we use the long words like botulinum toxin and dermal fillers. You know, we don't use those brand names. But basically, when I started working in medical aesthetics, it was very part-time. And I like to say I was guided into this profession because I was actually working in a number of businesses with my dad as well, but one of them was importing Dr. Robert Ray's Sensual Solutions skincare products. And one of them was a botulinum toxin-like cream, which actually, funny enough, worked. And if I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't have expected it to work. But where the skin was thinner, like around the eyes or the neck, it actually relaxed muscle in a way. But there were people saying, well, that's nice, but my frown lines are still there, can't you just do those injections for us? And eventually, after the 10th person asked, I thought, well, someone's giving me a message here. Let me go and do this course and learn how to do it and start doing it for these people. It was very part-time, and it just organically grew. They kept coming back. They'd bring their mums and their sisters and their fathers and their brothers. And I was like, okay, well, they obviously like the way I do it. And I never thought I would do that as a job. You know, people ask me, did you always want to do aesthetics? And I said, no, when I started med school, there was no aesthetics.
Yes.
It didn't exist. And so no, I didn't know I wanted to do it. But when people kept coming back and liking what I was doing, and I thought, oh, actually, it looks like I'm good at this. Let me keep doing this. And it kind of evolved into my full-time job. So with practice, obviously, I got even better. We were trying to count the other day, how many patients have we seen, or how many treatment sessions? And we got to about 60,000 over about 10, 11 years. And that's nice. I mean, it's a decent number because we're working every day. We work 6 days a week. And at some stages, we even have 6 patients in an hour. Just the way we've structured our rooms allow us to see patients without rushing them in and out. You know, they can sit there, have a coffee, watch the animals, listen to the music, just relax. We want that blood pressure to drop. It must be a bit of an experience. And then we can numb them, and it can be a more pleasurable experience. I think if you try to see too many people in one space or 2 rooms, you kind of rush them through.
Yes.
And they don't get the time to numb. Whereas now you can let them just take up space, enjoy the experience, and still see many patients in a day.
But this is also a very interesting thing for people that haven't been to visit you yet. But the estate in Houghton is something very special. It's not a regular medical office. You have animals, like you say. You have peacocks and tortoises, and what else do you have there? But you
know, there's so many types of animals. You have peacocks, silky chickens, rabbits, the cats, the dogs. And the thing is, we wanted it to not be like a hospital, because you go to the hospital when you're sick. So now when you go to the hospital, you actually start to feel sick because you've made that association. Anxiety comes in, people start to sweat, they have fear, you know, they do this when they go into a hospital. We want them to be relaxed, we want them to enjoy it, and so we want it to look as much like a house as possible. It's not meant to be scary and intimidating. Yeah.
And besides the patients coming in for what would appear to be the superficial aesthetic work, I imagine that you're really working with self-esteem and confidence.
You know, I made a few videos over time called The Psychology of Aesthetics, and they're still up on our Instagram page. And it goes into the reasons for why aesthetics exists, why it's popular, why people need it, why it's good for you, and why it's good for the world and for business and for sales and for, you know, all of these different aspects. But it's true. If you have a job where you need to speak to people, which is most jobs, you don't realize that you're actually involved in the process of sales almost all the time. You have a version of reality that you want to impart onto people. And every time you liaise with a customer or another company or, you know, even a patient, the thing is, there is this negotiation of these 2 versions of reality. And somebody will walk away from that with a version of reality being altered. And so when you are in that process, you want to be your best version of yourself. As soon as you start to think, is this person looking at me, or are they looking at this mark that I have on my cheek? Are they looking at me or the gap in my beard? You know, as soon as that's happening, you're not the best version of yourself. And in this interaction of life, you kind of put yourself at a disadvantage. And so even if it's something that other people don't see, if you think they're looking at it, it will affect you. It's the same with sweating. You know, if I'm wearing a black top and you can't see that I'm sweating, but I can feel that I'm sweating, immediately I get this, you know. Can they see it? And that changes your focus. So just that little element alone is enough. But it's only one of many reasons somebody would or should have aesthetic work done. And that's, again, the psychology of aesthetics. It's very deep, deeply ingrained in ourselves. Sometimes people will say, oh, it's not fair. You can't judge people by the way they looked. And that would be nice. It would be nice if it was fair and you could tell everybody, don't judge people by the way they looked. But as they say it, psychologically, deep down, they are judging you by the way that you look. And it's you can't help it. So there was a study done. And I like to talk about this because it seems at the beginning like it's contentious, like it's something people that will be upset about it. But it's based on many research studies and pages of referencing. If you had to even just look at the list of the studies, it'll take up many pages. But I'll give you an example. There was a study done where university professors were marking papers, and there was a picture on there purely for reference, just for identification purposes. These professors would never meet these people, but some were rated as attractive by other people. And there's some universal traits of attractiveness,
yes.
but some were rated as attractive and some were rated as unattractive. And they just divided them into two piles, had them all marked, switched the pictures all around, had nothing to do, randomly switched them around. And they found that the people with the more attractive faces were scored higher regardless of which paper they were on, and vice versa. So that was completely subconscious. Those people marking were giving them the benefit of the doubt more often than not, just because of the way they looked. And there was no, they didn't know these people. There was nothing that would make them want to do that. And it's a very powerful thing. So as much as we think sometimes that it's a superficial change, our brains are evolved to use those cues to make judgments about those people and about their health and about what they can or can't achieve in life. And that's quite exciting, because right now we can actually do something about that. Whereas, our parents couldn't do that. Maybe with surgery. Their parents couldn't do it with anything.
Yes.
So it was kind of like you're either born in this direction or you're born in that direction. And now, knowing that this bias exists, we can cross that bridge with simple injections. It almost seems like a science fiction story.
It's interesting. What do you think the biological drive is in that aspect, that we are driven towards attraction? Because obviously there's the procreation imperative, but after that, there's still this interest. What?
I think it's about health and wellness. If you look at all of the major aesthetic traits that are attractive, it has to do something with health and wellness. It has to do with longevity. It has to do with the freeness of disease. This, funny enough, actually extends into animals. They will judge each other in the same way. Things like peacocks that you brought up earlier. Those are an extreme example, but all the birds will do it. Symmetry, that type of thing, they will use that to judge the health of the people or the other animals that are exhibiting it. And it extends into many areas of our lives. If you think about it this way, let's look at finances. People are looking for ways to earn more money. Maybe you can get another master's degree. That will help. But what they've shown now is that being in the attractive side of that line will earn you more money. And it'll earn you as much as an additional master's degree. So if you have a master's, you will earn the same as somebody with 2 masters on the unattractive side of that line.
Okay.
And again, it's unfair.
Yeah.
They shouldn't. But it may not be unfair, and I'll tell you why. Let's say you're selling cars, and you are this now attractive person with a master's, but now you decide you want to sell cars. Because of the bias in people's brains, they will buy more cars from you. And so when you look at it on paper, you'll say, well, I made a good choice for this person. You won't know why you hired them, because you won't ever, you shouldn't knowingly do that. You shouldn't say, oh, this is a good looking person, let me hire them. But subconsciously, that's what will happen. You'll find a reason in the CV. Your brain will find a reason in the CV.
You feed your confirmation bias.
Exactly, you will. And then when they start selling more cars, you'll be like, oh, good, I was right about that person. But it is because of the bias that the whole world, every single one of us, has for attraction. And it doesn't matter about, straight or gay or, you know what I mean? It's opposite sexes. Women will do it to women, men will do it to men. Women will do it more to women than men will do it to women, which is the funny thing. And we do tend to punish ourselves when we don't stick to what people see. So, and here it's worse for men than for women. So a good-looking man is deemed to be intelligent. From the beginning, people will look at them and say, "Oh, that guy looks smart." How can you look smart? You know what I mean? You can't.
Yeah.
You can't see the IQ from the outside. But that's how people will do it. When you do something, they'll hire you and they'll have this assumption that you're smart. When they figure out that you're not,
But
if you're not,
subconsciously and on a subliminal level, not
yeah,
overtly.
exactly.
Yeah.
When they think that, they'll believe that you lied to them, and they'll be like, this guy's stupid. They will feel like you lied to them. Now, this is all based on the studies, okay? I'm not making any of this up. We can even reference them.
We should. We'll reference them
put them
in the video description, yeah.
So they'll punish men harder for that mistake that they never did. You know, no one did it on purpose. No one said, I'm smarter because I'm good looking. Women get the same thing, but it's less severe. The fallout is less severe for women when they have that same problem. So it's less fair and in some ways.
How do you apply your creativity and your artistry into aesthetics so that you have a unique approach?
So I like to say art meets science. That's kind of our motto. It has been for the longest time. And I feel like to be good at aesthetic medicine, you have to have both sides of your brain developed. You must use the science and the art. A lot of the science is in the product. You know, the people who develop it spend years in researching and how it works. We have to understand it and learn it and implement it in a way that makes scientific sense and is safe medically. But what you do with it is where the difference comes in. If you don't know what pretty is, you can't make somebody pretty. You won't know when to stop. You'll end up overinflating faces. You'll end up making them look like something's off. You know, when we spoke just now about attractive versus unattractive, certain elements only have to change by 1 millimeter to cross that line. If you think about how small a millimeter is, I mean, we're talking about the lips, the eyes. It's not that you need to change someone's face by 6 milliliters of change at one go to change anything. It's subtle, it's small. I like it when people say, I saw what you did. And this is someone said this to me the other day. They said, I saw what you did to that girl. I don't know what you did. I can't put my finger on it, but she looks amazing. And for me, that's exactly the way we like to work. And that's the art and the science coming together. Over the years, because it's grown in popularity, there's a lot of people looking now like they've been overinflated. I call it inflation. We don't like it. It's hyperinflation. Cheeks, lips, even sometimes the eyes, the noses. It's just terrible. It doesn't look pretty. It's not attractive, and it looks like you're trying too hard. So we made up something else called timeless elegance, and that's a new trademark. We actually trademarked it, timeless elegance, and it's more philosophy. It's about an approach to using all of these tools in subtle ways so that people look natural, healthy, youthful without looking done. And then we work on the skin tissue, the quality, the texture, the hair, the overall appearance, so that they don't end up looking done. And it's so easy to just end up looking like there's too much. But if you go slowly and let it integrate and you work with the face as a work of art, sometimes people think I'm exaggerating when I say that every patient is a unique work of art. But it is, because they have a different place they're starting from. The canvas is different, the reaction is different, and it's so subtle to work with that tissue to get it to do what you want. Sometimes people underestimate the importance and they think, well, you just put filler, 1 mil there, 1 mil there, great, it's going to look nice. It's very unlikely that will actually look nice.
Okay. Do you use the golden ratio when you're working with proportions in the face?
I do, but not with a ruler. Just like you can't really measure pretty with a ruler. You know, you can't measure love with a ruler either. But I let my brain do that.
Okay.
I developed the artistic side of my brain through the creative endeavors, the painting, the sculpting, the martial arts, all of these different things. And then I trust my brain to tell me that looks nice and that doesn't look nice. I don't really try to measure and say, well, this should be like this. The one thing I use is when I talk to patients, I'll say, well, when they ask me for bigger upper lips than lower lips, that's I'll say to them, look, it should be around 2/3 of the lower lip. And that kind of gets them to understand. But for me, I don't really measure, that's 2 centimeters, 3. I just kind of look at it and I say, well, I let my eyes do the judging, let my brain do the thinking, process it out and say, if I look at you, I think that looks better if I kind of work there. And so that's where it's very much art.
It's so important because I think in aesthetics you start to see with many practitioners coming into the field, there appear to be some kind of cookie cutter guidelines where you must do a mil here or 2 mils here, and then you see that people actually start to mimic each other. They look the same after they've had a certain amount of work done. So perhaps your application with your creativity is a great way to avoid these situations.
Is that people go through phases. They are introduced to aesthetics and they're not too adventurous. They like to go to somebody that they know has a good reputation. They've heard good things, they've seen good things, their patients don't look fake. They'll come to us, we'll work on them, they'll start to enjoy it. They'll possibly go one of 2 ways, or one of 3 ways. They may decide aesthetics is not something they're really keen on, they'll stop doing it. They may decide, I like the way it's going, I want to stay this way, we maintain, they'll stay with me. Or they'll get too adventurous and they'll ask me for things that I think are a bad idea. Now, ethically speaking, from a medical perspective, I can't do that. And from the business perspective, they are a walking billboard. I can't let them walk around looking stupid, because you'll see them and you'll say, hey, who did this? And they'll say, it was Reza, because they won't realize it looks stupid because they thought it was a good idea. They may do it with the best intention, thinking that you'll want to come to me, but they're really causing us harm. So when we do what's best for them, it's what's best for us as well. They'll then go off, find someone who'll just pump the face with giant cheeks and go through the cycle of, well, I thought it looks nice, until people start commenting and saying, look, you're my friend.
Take it down a notch.
You need to calm down. It doesn't look nice. And then they'll come back and they'll say, look, I made a mistake. I tried a few things. I also thought it was just simple. I went to my cousin who learned how to do this on the part-time. He's mainly a gynecologist, but he also does a little bit of filler on the side. That's one of the sayings that makes me go like, this is I do a little bit of aesthetics on the side. Because it's also like, well, should I do a little bit of gynecology on the side? It's not the same. And so later on, I think there will be challenges to the scope of practice around these different types of treatments. But for now, it's up to the patients and their evolution, and up to them to become more discriminating about where they go and what they do, what they're allowed to be done to their faces and their bodies. And so those patients, more often than not, will end up coming back, and then we'll discuss it, and then we'll work out a plan and get them back into looking natural, looking like them, and maintain their youthfulness for then hopefully years to come. So that's kind of like what I've noticed over the years, and I think that it's up to us to do things like this, where we can educate people and allow them to see that, look, there are different pathways that you could end up, and it's not unique to you. You're not the first person to go through this. So it's just about managing what you would get out of this whole process.
What would you like your impact to be in the aesthetics industry?
I think I think I'd like to make 2 impacts. One on the patients. I want them to see a visible, great result. I want them to look in the mirror and feel in love with themselves. Second, I'd like people coming into the profession to learn from my example. I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody, but I'm saying that if they can focus on the art and the science, develop their knowledge of the products, of anatomy, physiology, but also go to the movies that they like. Look at pretty faces. If they think someone's pretty, don't be shy to just have a look. don't be creepy about it, but try to figure out what it is that makes this person good looking to you. Not again to make a golden ratio adjustment and use that too closely. It's difficult. Again, the companies would like you to use a lot more of their product.
Yes.
And so they'll try to make it easier. They'll give you guidelines about you measure here, then you measure here, then you put a dot there. It doesn't work like that. Nobody would look nice like that. The average face would, but no one has the average face.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we do is we adjust it. It needs to be adjusted. So I want people to grow that side of their brain. They must focus on aesthetics, on beauty, on music, on martial arts, on anything that's artistic, and develop themselves holistically, and then they be able to work and get good results out of people's faces.
Okay. Do you think the average person has the appetite for to do the work?
The average doctor?
Yeah.
No. I think that they must want to do it. Like they have to have, with me, I said it was kind of a bit of guidance, but I was not coincidentally, I'd rather use the word fortuitously, already developing that side of my brain.
Okay.
I didn't know why, but I was already doing it. And then obviously studying the medical side of it and bringing it all together. There are people that can do that, should do that, and will really have very good results if they do that. And I think that if you're not the kind of person who would do that, then rather focus on a field of medicine that is more tailored to your personality and your ability, so that you can get the best outcome in that way, because we're not all the same. There's things that I can't and shouldn't do. I don't think I'd make a very good cardiologist. I don't, because it's not my personality and it's not my way of working. So in the same way, I don't think that people should just think, well, I am a cardiologist and sometimes I think I should do some injections.
Do you think it's just profit driven these days?
I think that does add an element of it. I think it's seen as easy money. But as fast as people come in and realize it's not easy money, as fast as they'll leave. Yeah.
What should patients look for when they're looking for an aesthetic doctor?
I think that they must look to their patients, assess them holistically, look for people who have been there, get an idea about what the doctor's like, what the results are like. And if they do try to work with them, they should also go slowly. They shouldn't just come and say, do whatever you want. I get patients who say that. It's a big compliment. But they should really test you out. Do a little bit of work, see how it looks, get the opinions of people who they know in their life. Oh, how do you think I look? I had some botulinum toxin done over here. What do you think? Is it working? Do I look good? Before you just start going down this crazy
rabbit hole.
And the fashionable things like the doll lips, Russian lips, fox eyes. People come in, young girls say to me, can you put a thread in here and pull this up? And I say, look, that comes with a lot of risk, and that's not the way you go to achieve this. Let's do it in a more gentle way. We work at the faces. I try not to get them to follow the fashions, and that was also the goal behind Timeless Elegance. This room, this is not a new fashion. It will look good, though, in 100 years' time.
Yeah.
And the same thing, a good-looking, pretty face will always be pretty. It may not be fashionable to have an eyebrow in a certain shape right now, but you shouldn't use aesthetics and semi-permanent treatments to do that, because what you'll end up with is an out-of-fashion face in 6 months' time. Follow fashion with your clothes, follow with your shoes, but your face should always be your unique signature.
Okay. Let's switch gears and talk about Pegasus. Tell us this origin story. How did you come up with this concept?
So, I went to Georgia, the ex-Soviet Union, Georgia, because there was a man who invited us to look at a plane that they were looking to sell off the design. And I thought, that's nice, because at some point I mentioned I was working with Dr.Reza creams, but what I didn't tell you about was it made me realize that I had to work the same amount almost to sell a cream as I did to sell this energy drink that we were making. And you'd need to sell 100 of those to make the same money as one cream. And I just thought, well, that's amazing. Where does this line end? And I decided it ended at property, yachts, or ships, and airplanes. Property is very tied to wherever you are, so it's out of your control, the value. Ships are boring. Planes I've always loved. I wanted to become a pilot since I was a kid. The best part of any holiday was getting on the plane. Didn't matter where on the plane I sat. If I was in the plane, I was happy. I could sleep. I could sleep sitting up. It doesn't matter. The sound of the plane makes me sleep. And now I have a little white noise machine that sounds like a plane, helps me to sleep, drowns out everything. But that's the kind of love that I had for aviation. And I thought, well, this is a good idea. Let me go and have a look at this plane. It was a nice plane, but it was boring. The inside was antiquated. And the outside looked nice, but I thought, if I'm building a plane in South Africa, selling it to the world, it needs to be unique. People have to have not a reason to buy it, but no reasons not to buy it. And again, like we spoke about, that undeniable attraction to the plane. So on the way back, I thought, I was brainstorming, and I was thinking about, well, how do I get this plane to be unique? There were ideas, supersonic, vertical takeoff, all of these different ideas. And I thought, look, people are spending billions trying to get supersonic going, and they're not getting it right. Let me look at something else. And I did actually have a dream about this. But what happened was I don't know the relevance of why I was in Japan, but I was driving a car through Japan. I was driving up and down these roads, and eventually I got to this airport. And I had two planes in this airport. One which was reddish maroon, and one blue, navy blue. And I didn't know the relevance of that. I think I do know now. With my logo of my practice is very deep red, and the logo of Pegasus is a deep blue, a navy blue. But the shape was very striking, the way that it looked. And I drew this into a PowerPoint. I made it with PowerPoint, and I animated it with PowerPoint. It was very strange. I still have that PowerPoint. I'll show it to you. But what the final design looks like now, or the design so far, because it will still change a little bit, is almost the same as that little drawing. So it was quite a process to go through. Once I had this idea of a vertical takeoff and landing business jet, I started looking for engineers to help me confirm it, conceptualize it. And I went to Denel. They kind of snickered. I forgot my pen on the table by accident. As I left, I came back to look for it, and I found a couple of them laughing, this could never work. Oh shit, he's there. I got my pen. I was like, oh, thanks, guys. They're like, oh, we were talking about something else. We'll give you must call us, give us a call. But I never went back really, because they were also meant to send me a business head to get in touch with, to develop the quote, and we still haven't got the quote. Danielle's already gone. Yeah. In the meanwhile, I thought, look, they don't understand what I'm doing. Let me look for other engineers. And I found some then who understood the vision, decided to do the conceptual design study, look at the actual engineering maths behind it. How big would a fan need to be able to generate enough thrust? How fast would it have to turn? Could this be achieved? Looking at different elements. Should we do ducted thrust from a hot gas engine? Obviously not. You can imagine what that will do to a golf course or a yacht. Yes. If you look at the F-35, the military, the F-35B is the V-TOL version of the F-35. Okay. And the way that works, it's got a big fan at the front, and it's got a duct at the back that rotates so that the hot gas goes downwards. What that would do to anything organic or living is burn it and kill it. It can even melt the tar on the road.
Is that the same as the Harrier, the same principle?
Same principle. The Harrier also had some ducts that turned. But the F-35B is now like a step ahead.
It's a
the control systems are much easier for a pilot to operate. But that hot gas will burn, it will melt a tar road. What they do on the aircraft carriers is they even spray these sprinklers to try to
Cool it.
affect that. Yeah. And so we thought, look, to make it more user-friendly, to be able to use it at a game farm, on a wooden deck, on a lawn, we should use cool air fans. And that's how we ended up with the fan in wing configuration. And that's what drove us to decide, look, we need to have dedicated fans for the ones in the wings, which are static thrust, because you're moving at no speed. And the ones at the back need to be shaped in a different way for fast forward thrust. That's also unique, and it'll give you a much more efficient and faster flight. If you look at the tilt rotors, what they do is they bring those two designs together, and they make a fan that's good for both jobs, but it's perfect for neither of the jobs. It's a compromised fan. And so it makes sense in some ways, but it's not what we wanted to bring to the market. And that's kind of where we moved on and said, well, that looks feasible. Let's look at the next step, market research. And I included that in my finance master's as an assessment on an OEM. And I went to do research at various aviation companies. I did interviews at air shows like eBase, and put together a nice document that showed that, look, these are the things that people would want out of a new type of plane. This is the value they give to the vertical takeoff. And these are how many we think we can sell. And it was a good business model that we had built. And I like the fact that it went through the university, because they kind of help us with the formation of that. But from there, we then went in cycles. Okay, well, financial feasibility, market research, technical feasibility. These are the main ones that we need to keep on going back to. And so what I thought is, let's go up a level. And as long as everything keeps checking out, we can keep on investing time and money and effort into the project. And if we ever get to a point where it's showing something negative, like it won't work, it'll be too expensive, it won't sell, anything like that, then I'll cut my losses and I'll learn from the process, and I'll apply that to future projects.
Okay.
So far, thankfully, we haven't reached that. And anytime we reached a challenge, we figured out a way to overcome it. Right now, we've already flown 8-scale models. We now have quarter-scale models built, which incorporate the thrusting, the lifting, and the control system. We've built a full-scale cockpit, which we're now putting together for the test flying pilots. And they'll be flying that in their big screen in Oudtshoorn with our control system, and they'll be able to give us feedback and say, look, I think that you need to adjust the following parameters. And so it's taken us forward quite a bit. The nice thing is we've recently partnered with some new engineers. And what this team will be doing is working out the best ways to put the plane together. They'll build a full-scale flying model with pilots inside. It's a big jump ahead. It's a nice jump, though. It's kind of like, again, we feel very blessed and guided, because it's something I would have prayed for.
Yeah.
In fact, to say that we would love some engineers to come on at risk and work on this project shows a lot of faith in the project. So that's kind of our arrangement right now with them. And I'm very excited to show you what the next year or two will bring as we get this flying into the sky. And I'm very excited. I mean, that's I could talk about as well for a whole day.
The jet was featured in the major Hollywood picture, The Lost City, with Brad Pitt, Channing Tatum, Sandra Bullock. Tell us how that happened.
Okay. I was sitting in my office, and we got an email one day from someone who said, I'm from Paramount Pictures. We'd like to put your plane into a movie. I said, look, hey guys, someone's trying to scam us. He thinks we're going to give him money to put our plane in the movie. I say, okay, how much do you want? He says, well, we don't want anything. We want your permission to put the design into the movie. And I said, well, what do you mean? Don't you want us to pay $2 million? Isn't that the fee? He said, no. There's a there would be a small fee for the rendering, something like $12,000, but we don't need a fee. We want this in the movie because we want something that will be real, but is cutting edge. And there was even an element in the script where there was a runway in a forest, and I said, but you don't need a runway because it's VTOL. And they were like, oh, that's exciting. Okay, fine. So we sent them our designs. We sent them the internal designs and dimensions. They actually built it. They physically built this internal cockpit, internal cabin, and all the scenes that you see with Sandra Bullock falling down and them sitting in there, that's a hard built cabin. It was great to see. The outside was obviously CGI for now. But it gave a good illustration of the mission. It landed, they put it in there, they flew to the beach, they landed on the beach, they got out, it took off, it flew away. And then if you think about what an advert that was for us, again, people don't watch it like this, but I watched it like this. We took it, we landed, it was great, they got to the island. Her friend wants to rescue her. Has to take 3 planes, catch a boat, take, fly with a guy with a goat in the boat, and end up getting there days later, which is kind of a great advert. If I had to show that first and then say, well, let's go get her, it would have made a very big impact on how you perceive the utility of the plane. So I think they did a good job for us. And I'm really happy about that. I'd be happy for the plane to be in many movies. And hopefully as we get it built and flying, they'll come back and ask us to be in the next James Bond or Transformers.
Whatever it is.
Who knows where it'll go.
How did you find the response was from people after the movie?
Good.
Potential investors and...
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
It helped us to attract a lot of potential partners, a lot of investors, possible future customers. Things... like people would get in touch with us and say, when will it fly? Because when it flies, we want 4.
Okay.
And the same thing happened when we displayed at eBay. I went with Jason. You had him on your show recently. He's pretty much my best friend. He works with me on Pegasus. And we went to eBay. We physically built our own display unit. We were drilling, building the thing with our hands. And this was before I built the full-scale model. Which I pretty much, again, I've got some guys working with me, but I built much of that myself. With my own hands, I had to learn how to do that because growing up, I was never someone who would build things. I would do sculpting, painting, like I say, these type of things, but I wasn't handy with my hands. I couldn't build this for you. I could now, though. But because I learned how to do that. And I learned about materials, and I learned about carbon fiber and fiberglass and molding and that type of thing, but it was a process of just figuring out how can we get value out of what exists without spending the $5 million that all these companies that I've spoken to were trying to get us to spend to build this simple shape. I mean, it's a great shape, but it doesn't seem to make sense. And so that's why I learned about it, and that's why we built it for, that full nose was a couple $100,000 in total versus 5 million from that company, $1 million from that company. And so I enjoyed that process. But to get back to the question, what was the question?
What was the question? I think we got sidetracked on that.
Indeed.
I asked about,
the response.
The interest, the response.
It gave us a good response. We got nice attention from it. And I think it still gives us attention. I think it'll give us a lot more attention as time goes by too.
And I think we'll overlay a clip from the movie in this video as well, so people can actually see it, in action.
It was nice to see it in full scale. We looked at it, we sat there, and it was literally full size, 15 meters, taking off. It was goosebumps. Everyone was screaming. I had to go and watch it again because I wanted to watch it in quiet.
I think the utility of this jet is really what makes it a very attractive option for people. So maybe if you go through the biggest ways in which this will disrupt the industry.
When I started with this project, it was 2012. Drones were still new. eVTOLs didn't exist. There are a number of little projects now that have come into the forefront that have made some progress. And these eVTOLs, they're not the same as what we're doing. They're meant for little hops. They're meant to get you from the pencil club to the beach or to the airport. They're not meant to get you from Joburg to Durban or across the whole of the USA, anywhere within Europe. It's meant to be a regional jet. And so we can use that for corporate travelers, private jets, anyone who would use a helicopter and a plane. Because if you're looking at the value of time, you think about any journey that takes you through an airport will add 4 hours to the journey. So that's driving to the airport, processing yourself through the airport, getting on the plane, then doing the same thing on the other end. So when you're looking at a regional journey of 2 to 6 hours, that becomes a big proportion of the journey. So let's say Monaco to London is a 1 hour flight in the Pegasus. But if you had to do that, it's 5 hours now. If you're doing all of the various door to door, it's a 5 hour trip for nothing. If you were looking at, flying from Tokyo to Joburg, that long flight, the time in the airport is proportionately not such a big headache. But when it comes to shorter flights, that's why I thought a regional flight was ideal from a user perspective, but also from a size. It needs to fit onto a helipad. As soon as you make it bigger than that to accommodate more fuel or more people, you now take away the ability to land anywhere. You have to land at a big field or at a specially prepared airport, and then again, you just limit yourself. So the key parameters were it must fit onto a helipad. That's why it seems fairly square. It's not longer than the wingspan. And it must be under 5,700 kilograms so that we could certify for a single pilot operation.
Okay.
Because we want the owner pilot to be able to fly himself without hiring another pilot. And then that seat becomes a usable passenger seat. So what happens is, that's the one use of it, is saving time. But that comes in handy when you need an air ambulance, when you need to do sea rescue, search and rescue, policing, anti-piracy, anti-poaching, servicing oil rigs and yachts. You just create a much bigger footprint that you can service with the plane.
It seems also the ideal vehicle for transporting high-value, low-volume items like jewelry, I suppose, or medicines.
Well, it'll be a far safer way of transporting these things around, and it'll be cheaper to fly than a helicopter because you're not fighting against the air. You have wings that you can fly on, but you can land kind of wherever the helicopter could have landed. So it may become a new way of transporting cash in transit, high value
because you
goods,
could,
like you say.
You could land anywhere.
You can land anywhere.
Your routes could be, I suppose, changed organically as you need to unfold it to avoid prying eyes. Yeah,
strategically you could do whatever you need to do. You could land on a rooftop here and another rooftop there. It's difficult for anyone to get to you.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's very interesting. I saw in your presentation that Abbott Aerospace rated Pegasus as the 6th most likely project to succeed out of the top 100. So how does that impact your viability?
So Abbott's Aerospace actually looked at 200 eVTOL projects around the world, included us in a section called Business Jet. There were 2 others, and we were the first in that category and the 6th in the total. Now, why this is important is because he looked at all of the different aspects of these companies, of aviation companies, including funding, including ties to things like companies like Boeing and Embraer and Gulfstream. And despite all of those things being in the favor of many other companies, ours was the first because the design is so good and because the technology that we're using is so available to us to be able to get it done. So it's the combination of these different aspects that makes the plane feasible, but we're not saying that you need a new type of engine or that you need a new method of controlling certain elements. As we progress, we will patent more aspects, but the patent was about the holistic collection of different elements in the plane.
And that's a global patent.
Well, South Africa, 6 European countries, the USA, and the UK.
Okay.
And that's because we saw those as the main markets and the main countries that manufacture airplanes.
Okay.
So that's how we thought we would be able to enforce that without spending too much to actually protect it in every single country in the world.
That makes sense.
So there may be customers for us in Saudi Arabia, but there's no one there that could build a plane and sell it within that country. So there's a little bit of bootstrapping behind the decisions that we make early on. Later on, once you've sold a few, it'll be easier on the next project to patent more widely. But we had to kind of make that decision about how do we spend money, just to get the most value out of it. Kind of like I was saying about building that model myself.
Yes.
We could have paid someone to do it or to build this much for the same price. And I'm doing this as in literally this much of the front of the airplane. But it was just to figure out how to balance that. So when it comes to the actual airplane, what was the question again?
We lost ourselves again. We were talking about Abbott.
Abbott. Okay. So we took Abbott as a very big compliment because he looked at everything that had to do with these planes and he chose us as number 6. There's a nice graph and you zoom it out and you look at what it looks like. He drew a line. He said these are the ones that are likely to never happen. These are the ones likely to happen. And we were right there at the top in a little cluster at the top. And so that's encouraging for us. We didn't know who he was. He randomly did it, just like Paramount Pictures randomly. They could have chosen any of those projects to kind of put into their movie. But to make it make sense, they had to choose something with a good range. And to make it look realistic, they had to make it something that could actually perform it. Logically, reasonably, could it perform that job? Some of the things you look at, you can see that the plane will never do the job. It's like looking at this book. And the design looks like the book, and they're saying, well, this is going to do the following kind of job. And because we're based in San Francisco, we managed to get $500 million, and we're taking the project forward, and then it doesn't go anywhere. But, the look of the project, the way the plane looks and flies, it all makes sense.
Yeah, it's believable.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. You, the order lead time, it's 12 to 18 months after FAA certification. So what are the milestones that are required to meet the FAA certification?
That's changed. With the new partners that we're working with now, we'll be able to shorten the delivery time on these planes. And that's because if we need to build more planes, we can replicate the robotic line as many times as we need to meet customer demand. So it wouldn't be that long anymore.
Okay. What would it be roughly?
Well, we probably could get it down to something like 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
I mean, if you were really able to get the robotic line to be diversified enough in each of those little robots, things like robot arms can be used in so many different ways that you can scale up and scale down quite quickly. You could get it to even shorter. I don't want to commit to numbers now, but it's almost unbelievable how short that time frame can become. The thing with these types of projects is you obviously want to make sure that you've got FAA certification. And to do that, you need to go through a process of flying, demonstrating certain elements, completing tasks, flight testing certification. It's a big element of the project on its own. And that's the next step once we fly the full model. That's where we'll go, and that's where we'll start to be able to deliver on a mass scale. Before that, we could actually start to deliver as experimental airplanes, but not for commercial operations. So you could buy one and fly it yourself as an experimental plane. Once we're satisfied that we've covered all of the safety features and we make sure that nothing bad can happen with the plane, because as you can imagine, I'm a doctor. We should be doing things to help people. We shouldn't kill anyone. But from a business side of it, it can't be good PR if we start selling them and people start crashing them.
Yeah. So realistically, what kind of a timeline do you think until you have planes?
Well, it's much shorter now.
Yeah.
We were previously looking at a 7 to 8 year timeline, including that certification, including the manufacturing, that type of thing. But the new way of doing it, with a greater degree of automation in the manufacturing and in the engineering side of it, we should be able to fly something within 2 years. And we should be able to get that certification and delivery within 4 to 5 years.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's exciting. I think for anybody watching that's interested, that timeline is going to be quite important to them.
Very exciting, and I think that the more we work on it, the more we'll be able to contract that even more.
Okay. Have you had any common criticisms from the industry, and how have you dealt with these?
Well, so some of the engineers we spoke about previously, they would say that they weren't sure how the project could go forward, that the plane is 30 years away, that type of plane can't exist. And then later on, a few years later, when we show them, well, this is the model, this is how it works, they'll go, oh, that's how you're going to do it. Oh, wow, okay, that could work. Well, that's a nice thing. That's a nice kind of circle to go around. The next thing is, people would say things like, this project is too big for South Africa. It should be in America. We say, well, why? They're not doing it. They don't know how to do it. They haven't done it. If they were going to, they should have done it.
They would have, yeah.
But we did, and this is the design, and we've patented it, and so now we're busy exploring it, and we'll be developing it, and then we'll build it and sell it and export it to wherever we want, and we'll build it wherever we want. So that was another one, and it was quite surprising that people would say that, because it wasn't the Americans that would be saying it to us. It would be people from here. And we say, well, why do you have so little faith in your own country and in your own fellow citizens? You should be more encouraging. You should be working together. We've even had discussions with certain elements in government who would say, this is a whole new industry. And I almost think, but isn't that your job? Are you not supposed to be creating industry for your citizens? Is that not why you're in government? What did you think the job was? Were you supposed to just watch industry diminish? No, you're the DTI, you're the Department of Science and Technology. You're supposed to be stimulating this. You're supposed to support these projects, and you're supposed to make it better. But literally we would get this, oh no, we don't know if we should be stimulating that. And I say, well, look, these are the number of jobs it will create. This is the amount of foreign revenue you'll bring into the country. This is the amount of tax you'll generate. Is that not a good idea? Yes, but you haven't done it before. I said, but no one's done it before. You can go around the whole world. You'll never find someone who made a vertical takeoff and landing business jet and started selling it to the whole world in a mass production way. It doesn't exist. No one has experience in this. What are you asking for?
Yeah.
So, I mean, those were brief discussions at best, because we thought, well, it's pointless trying to get, squeeze blood from a stone. Let's rather look at what we have and use what we have to take the project forward. And that's when we started doing things, like I said, learning how to work with the materials, learning how to progress it in some way, and to build it in some way, and to get progress in a way that we could see tangible change. There was one other comment we had a few times, is where people said, I don't think this plane will work. So once I was on a radio interview, someone phoned in, took the effort to phone in to try to ruin my day. But, it's difficult to do that. So he phoned in and he said, I don't think this will work. I said, well, why not? He said, well, I just don't see how 4 fans can lift a whole plane. I said, look, I don't disagree that you can't see how that will work. But if you've got any competing engineering research that you've done, you're welcome to submit it, and we'll compare it to what we've done over these years, and we'll see how we can improve it. And he said, well, No, I haven't done anything. I just heard about the project now, but I didn't think it would work. And I said, well, thanks for calling, but it's something that it does fascinate me that somebody would make up an opinion and come to a conclusion based on this much information. You know? Based on everything I know and everything I've learned, I can see how this plane will work. I sometimes have doubts. I say, well, maybe it's not going to get made. You know, am I wasting my time? And that's something Jason will say is, well, don't live in your mind too much. You've done the research. Don't become anxious about it. And obviously he can see things that not everybody can see, and he'll say, I can see that this too will just be a great plane. It's going to do its job. It's going to be an awesome project. So unless you've got a real reason why you think it won't work, like you've identified some engineering problem with it, then don't doubt yourself or the project.
Because you've engaged the experts to do this research and the work for you, and they've created the body of work that supports it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why be negative?
No, exactly. It's just sometimes things take longer than you would expect them to. But I again feel like there's guidance. If I had created this original concept and we went to anywhere and we had all the funding we needed, we would have built a plane that's inferior to what we're building now. We would have built it with a huge gearbox, with 3 engines, with a lot of manual configurations that are now automated, that are electronic, that are converted to little wires instead of huge gearboxes. And we will end up with a much better plane that will last us for a much longer time and be competitive for many more years because we didn't have any funding at the beginning. And it's strange to think that way, but ultimately that's what it's done for us.
Yeah, it kind of conspired to lead you in the correct direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The guidance. Again.
Yeah. Let's break it down simply. How the Pegasus has advantages over any conventional business jet.
So there's 2 things I want you to think about. Let's look at helicopters and let's look at business jets. The helicopter, it's got a risk that you wouldn't have in a plane. It doesn't have wings, it can't glide really. So it makes people scared of it, and it's not as safe as a regular plane with wings. A helicopter can land vertically in many places, but again, the wingtips are critical. If you had to land in a tight space and a rotor touched a light pole or edge of a wall, it would be the end of that helicopter. It would go down. With the Pegasus, the wings, the outer third is not critical. If you lost it in V-TOL, you could still just land in V-TOL. You couldn't then fly nicely, but you could still land. It remains to be seen whether you can't fly at all forward. We'll know about that as time goes by, but you can still land vertically. What limits a helicopter is what we call retreating blade stall. So if you imagine the blades are spinning and you're moving forward, and relative to the airflow, the blade that's going forward will just keep going faster and faster and faster as you increase the airflow. But the blade that's going backwards will now go slower and slower and slower until you get to a point where it's not generating enough lift and it'll fall out of the sky. The thing is, some people may say, well, why don't you speed up the rotor more? Then you go supersonic. That tip can't be any much faster because you'll destroy it. And so there's limitations to what a helicopter can do and can become. So what goes faster is an airplane. It's the business jets that exist already. The thing is, they need an airport. You could get short takeoff and landing in some of them, but you can't really get zero space takeoff and landing. And they have, again, the advantage of wings. But if you stall that, you can still fall out of the sky in a plane. We can land then with a Pegasus. You fly at a full speed of a business jet, but you can land, you can stop and land like a helicopter. But the advantage over a regular business jet, there's 2 other advantages. Because it's lightweight in its construction with the carbon fiber, in order to be able to do the VTOL, you end up burning less fuel when you're doing your flying. And we even did a calculation where it burnt about a third of the fuel of a similar sized business jet. What happens when it comes to stalling a Pegasus is that the software, if you're not generating enough lift off the wings, the fans will open and spin up, and you'll actually then be in vertical takeoff and landing mode. So as a result, it's safer than both of these modes of existing transport. So it's kind of disruptive in that way, in that not only can you do the job of both, but you are safer than both, or safer than either.
So the design currently is for a fairly small business jet. Could the technology be adapted for larger commercial purposes?
It could be scaled up or down. We just thought that this would be the first way to get in and give us the most utility out of it. But again, if you needed to use it for transporting goods or people into jungles or not jungles, that's a bad example because there's trees in the way. But if you needed to get into a desert, for example, then you could use that. You could scale it up and you could use it to do bigger jobs.
Okay. And what kind of cargo does the current configuration allow?
I mean, you'd look at a cabin size, pretty much the size of between a Honda Jet and a Phenom 100 airplane. So that's kind of like the mass that you would be able to take, or the volume you'd be able to transport.
Okay. I was looking at the Honda Jet the other day, and the running costs, I think the jet is somewhere around 12 million US, but the running costs of that jet are around $1 million a year. How would the Pegasus compare?
It's less.
With running costs, yeah?
Well, for a number of reasons, apart from the lower fuel burn, it's also the way that we structured the different fans and the way that they work and the electric motors. You are using two fuel burning engines right now onto generators, and it's basically then a hybrid electric airplane. What will happen then in time to come is, as we access better types of propulsion, we can remove those fuel burning engines, use that space for things like batteries or a small nuclear device that we're working on with some nuclear engineers, and then you can fly for almost forever. But what we want that's a separate project. It's not about the Pegasus is not dependent on that. For now, that construction of it and that basic architecture will make it far cheaper to operate.
Okay. Would you need a special crew to service the crafts, or could it be done at existing aviation areas?
Like the service,
like service and maintenance of the.
I'm just trying to remember what that's called. The MROs. Okay, so existing MROs, the maintenance organizations, they'll be able to do the servicing. We just have to train them.
Okay, that makes sense. The pricing strategy on the jet, where do you see it positioned?
We settled on around $20 million. It wouldn't cost us that much to build, obviously. There'll be a profit margin. But when we look at things like the Airbus H160, selling for about $22 million a few years ago, and the AW609, which is a tilt-rotor VTOL, selling for about $24 million, even though it flies shorter range, needs a much bigger space. That needs it's 24-meter wingtip to wingtip with critical tips on the rotors, so they need an even bigger space and a margin for error to be able to land. We decided if we were any cheaper, it would look like there was something wrong with the plane. Rightfully, with the right kind of marketing, we could probably sell it for more than either of those, maybe 26 or 27. But we also thought we wanted it to open up a bigger market. It's kind of like a triangle about who could afford that and the number of people that could buy it. And so we wanted to rather sell more than to sell fewer jets. It's better for building up the hours over time and to allow us to evolve it and to create better versions of it as time goes by. What happens with an airplane, if you think about it, there's about a 20% maintenance fee almost that you would look at for any airplane, and this is normal in aviation. So we hope to be able to make it more efficient and better, but it's something that's acceptable and is normal for airplanes, is that you would spend about 20% of it in maintenance per year. So every 5 years, you essentially sell another plane to the person. And so we've put that into our structure, into our profit and business models. But again, if we can figure out how to make it more efficient for the users, we will, to our advantage, to everybody's advantage. But that's kind of why we settled on about a $20 million price tag.
Okay. With the design of the jet and with the capabilities, there must be a fair amount of interest to militarize it. What's your position on that?
So the thing with military applications of the plane is, depending on who we buy the engines from, we may not be allowed to sell it in that way. But also we decided a while back not to use it or allow it to be used for military because of the ethical side of it. You know, the karmic link. Have we contributed towards people being slaughtered or massacred or invaded, or, you know, it may not always be a self-defense tool. It's a different thing. If I could make guns, for example, that were only for self-defense, that wouldn't be used for bank robberies or for, you know, for negative things, then I would. But you can't. You don't know how people will use them. That said, if someone bought one or few and used it and engineered it and did their own thing with it, there's nothing we could actually do. We would try to stop it though, and, you know, maybe we would say we couldn't support the project anymore from a maintenance point of view if you used it for war, because I'd like there to not be war in the world. So however, policing, anti-piracy, anti-poaching, that type of thing we would support. We would want it to be used as a weapon that could hide and quickly sneak up on poachers and do whatever it needs to do.
Okay. And how are you financing the project?
Most of it's come from aesthetics. I like to say it's the first airplane that's powered by botulinum toxin. But we also, from time to time, do public share sales. And we structure it in a way that makes sense. So it would be silly for us to try to offer someone a share that would give them a return in 2 years when there's no money coming in. I think that's also illegal. So what we do is every few years or months we hold a share sale, and they're not huge. They bring in like enough money for us to move the project forward a bit faster. We kind of use it as we get it. So not immediately as we get it, but it determines how we operate in the next 6 to 12 months. And based on what we raise, we put that to work and we use it to take the project forward. So far we've been structuring them in a similar way to a 7-year zero coupon bond, because if you create value now and the interest accumulates each year, even though you're not getting paid out, you would still be liable for the tax. And so when it happens that you accrue the interest at year 7, when you do the redemption, you're only liable for taxes at that point. And that's why we structured it in that way, but also to allow us time to actually build and sell and create a revenue. There are also basically convertible notes, which means you could treat it as either debt or equity. When you got to that point, that maturation point, people could choose to go either way. And the interest rate we offer is not bad. It started off higher when we were at a higher risk on the project, but as we've de-risked over time, literally through de-risking projects, we've reduced that interest rate. It's still higher than prime, but that's not what we would like people to look at as the main reason for them investing. We obviously want them to love aviation, want to be a part of it, look for a way to be involved in a bigger way in the future. But also what we've tied to this is 10% of the profitability of the company is tied to these public share sales, like shares, as a group. So, and that could be a lot more. Even if we sell just one by year 7, that could be a lot more than the percentage accrual per annum. And that's, I guess, how we make it more attractive, and we allow more to be shared with the people who have faith in the project and who actually make it possible.
Okay. And you currently have an investment opportunity open at the moment?
We do. We have one that started earlier this month. It'll run until about mid-August. People have until then to register their interest. So as long as they go on and sign the form,
Yeah.
for whatever shares they want. They can submit that until mid-August. They have until mid-September to make payment for those shares, but they can't put in a form. So if somebody says, look, I want 100 or 1,000, but they only end up taking 10 and paying for 10, that's fine, as long as they've shown their interest within the 3-month window period.
Okay. So we'll put a link in the video description so people can download that
With pleasure.
form.
With pleasure.
Yeah.
You know, for us, like I say, if we use that funding, it'll take us forward faster. If we don't do any of it, we'll just move forward a little bit slower, but we'll never stop moving forward. But, you know, there's a lot of times that people will say to us, how can I get involved? And they're not really in the field. They're not engineers. They're not pilots. They're not any of those things. And they want to take this forward somehow because they have faith in their country and in the people that live here and in what we can do here. And so that's a way for them to become involved.
Okay. And is it open just to individual investors or corporates and institutional investors as well?
It's open to anyone.
Okay. All right.
Wait, we do actually do a small vetting process.
Yes.
They can't be illegal funds. So they have to give us a copy of their ID. We have to do a small KYC and, you know your customer. And we can't take money from, example, the sale of arms.
Yes.
You know, that type of thing. We need to know where the money comes from.
Okay, that makes sense. And just so investors are clear on what they'll be receiving, it's a fixed interest rate. It's redeemable at the end of a period. It's, again, you said a convertible note.
In that way.
Okay, all right. And what other rounds of funding do you anticipate after?
So we've had some nice discussions with the IDC about the project. And our conclusion was that once we fly the plane with pilots in it, they will be able to come in and work on the industrialization and the commercialization and flight testing and certification side of it. So between our new engineering partners who are working on that exact thing and that sort of commitment from them, it's very unlikely that we'll need to do any future fundraising. The truth is, once we get to a point where we're flying and landing the plane at different air shows, for example, like we spoke about the E-base, there was a man who came up to us and said, you know, I work for the royal family in Dubai, and we would be interested in 4 once you fly it. That's the type of thing that we would rely on. And then we can start taking deposits, and then we can start taking
become self-funding
pre-delivery payments, and we start to access, I guess, market funding from the revenue side. And so it's very possible that this will be our last public share sale. If it happens again, it happens again, but I can't actually see us doing another one.
Okay. And would the IDC come in as debt or equity partners?
Well, that's still to be determined. You know, it's still, we don't have anything written. But, you know, they have offered kindly to join us whenever we do speak to other people who would like to come in as investors or as larger investors. They would be willing to come in and have those meetings with us. So it's something that we still have to determine. I guess we'll know when we get there.
I think once you have a viable flying plane, you'll have money flying in from everywhere. So it won't really.
Yeah, I think it is one of those things that if you had to draw it, it's like a log scale. It exponentially becomes more attractive the further along you get. And that's not just from a perspective of investment, but also from customers, from potential partners, from joint ventures with other engineering and aviation companies for marketing and branding. But I guess it's one of those things. The more we see people coming in earlier, the more we'll want to work with them later.
Okay. As we mentioned in the beginning, the podcast is called The Peak Performance Life. And you're a man that lives your life at the peak. How would you define the peak performance life?
I think it's about, like you said, balance, about holistic wellness at the same time, and about identifying your strengths and weaknesses and working with them. It's about just making sure that you are objective in your assessment of yourself and in where you want to go. But also when you're not sure about where that is, it's about just maintaining yourself in the best possible shape. So there's many different types of health and wellness, and almost, I guess you could call it, different types of wealth. So the thing is, you would look at psychological, physical, financial, adventure, impact, family. There's a few of them. And this is the thing, you sometimes hear about stories where you say, well, someone, if they saw money as the only form of wealth, they would be very poor. Because it's true. You need to be looking at all of those elements and understanding how you interact with all of those and bring it all together and let the spiritual guidance take you forward and make sure that you're not neglecting any aspect of that. Because it's pointless having, billions of dollars, but you have no health to enjoy it, and no friends, and no value in life. And we owe it to ourselves and to the people around us to kind of work with our bodies and work with our minds and work with all of these elements and just to bring it all together so that you can give your best. It's hard, my dad used to say, it's hard to finish the journey when you've got a flat tire. So it's about recognizing when you have that flat tire, knowing or being willing to learn to find out how to fix that tire, and then to rectify it and then do the best you can with what you have.
What do you find are common habits that hold people back from reaching their peak?
Denial is one of them. Denial of your limitations. Cognitive dissonance, where you are taught something at a young age and you cling to those beliefs for the rest of your life. Anytime something comes up that challenges that belief, you go, whoa, I don't want to hear. I'd rather think that you are stupid than to listen to what you have to say. And it's very damaging to people. They can live their whole lives in a way that they kind of have blinkers on, not looking
They imprison themselves.
They put themselves into a prison and they congratulate themselves for being there because they shut out anything that doesn't fulfill this vision that they've created or this illusion that they've created. And there's a card, Jason does sometimes, picks it up, it's called The Tower. And it's about illusions breaking down. And it's sometimes can be a scary thing to see, but it's a good thing because it's about false situations breaking and then you see the truth and what's behind there. So it's about, I guess, truth and understanding what the universe is trying to teach you, making the right life choice about those decisions and learning the life lesson that you're being taught and moving forward from there. So those are the things I think that hold people back. It's a lot of denial, fear, obviously, fear of the unknown, fear of failing. We sometimes look and think, I could do that if I wanted to do that. Let's say this pilot thing. I want to become a pilot. I've always thought if I want to be a pilot, I can be a pilot. Once I started studying the book, I thought, what if I fail? Maybe I can't become a pilot. It becomes real. And that will stop people from even actually attempting to become a pilot. So it's for us to just let go of the fear. And as long as what you're doing is not going to be fatal, I'm not saying go into a casino and gamble all the money you have because you think you can do it. You have to be reasonable and logical. But when you have a justifiable reason for going after something and you've got a desire for it, then you must do it. Just don't let the fear hold you back.
If there's one essential thing that everybody should do to improve their lives, what would it be?
Gym. I know that sounds simple. I know it sounds like it doesn't feed your brain. It's working out the body, but it's not. If I think about what happens if I go to gym, you work your body. You are working every element of your body. You feed your brain. The circulation improves. It's time to think. It's spiritual in a way that you can almost get into this meditative zone of working and improving yourself. And anything that someone throws at you, you'll be able to better handle if you have gone to gym. So that's one of the things.
I agree with you 100%.
There's a few that I think, obviously your diet, what you put in is important. You can't be eating crap and wonder why your health is not there, why your mind is blurry. What you eat makes a very big difference. And surrounding yourselves with people that feed you, that you feed each other. It's energy exchange at the end of the day. There's certain people that will want to draw off you, like energy vampires. They want to take from you. It shouldn't be like that. You should be around people that you feed each other and you grow each other and you elevate each other.
And if there was one thing that everybody should avoid, what should that be?
Self-doubt, giving into fear, and I know you're saying one thing, but I can't stop with one thing. And, you know, when it comes to food, there's nothing that you can say, well, never eat any of this ever, unless it's poison. But you should balance that. You should work out what you should and shouldn't eat, what works for your body. And it's the negativity and self-doubt that kill more dreams than failure ever will. And it's sounds like a cliche, but it's so true. Most good ideas, I don't remember who said this, but I remember it because it's a good saying. They said the best, if you go to the graveyard, you'll find the best wealth of ideas and inventions, because most people take them with them to the grave.
So I think, to paraphrase, you would say just jump in with both feet, do it, and don't doubt yourself. Have faith.
But with reason, like I'm saying with the plane. Assess it step by step. Okay, this makes sense. It's a huge elephant, but we eat it one bite at a time. Well, that looks good. Let's go another one. Let's go another one. And it's not to say go recklessly forging ahead, but it's also not to say, you know, well, analysis paralysis. I'm over here. One day, once I know enough, I'll go over there. It's not. It's, well, this is step one. Oh, we took step one. Hey, we're still here. Okay, step two. Okay, step three. And then if it's a million steps, it's a million steps. But
at least you
can never get there if you don't take step 1 and 2 and 3.
Okay. I started this podcast with the idea that there'll be a tradition at the end where there'll be a quote or a poem or something that, at least for me, says something about the guest. And I was thinking about you, and you come across as someone who can achieve anything that you put your mind to, but it doesn't inflate the ego where you've become big-headed about it. You're approachable, you're empathetic, you're a caring, sensitive guy with wild intelligence and creativity. So I'll read this quote by William P. King. "The great scientists, as all great men, have not been concerned with fame. The joy of achievement that comes with finding something new in the universe is by far their greatest joy. A great research scientist is constantly discovering new things in his field. This is his reward. He knows how to spend long years in preparation and long hours in investigation, with no thought of public honor or reward." And I think that sums you up. Your gift is in your work.
Who said that?
William P. King.
That's great. I like that.
Yeah.
I'll definitely keep that in the back of my head. Or I'm taking that piece of paper with.
Sure. Yeah. Of course.
No, thanks a lot. That's been very.
It was a pleasure to have
exciting.
you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It's a compliment again to even be invited to sit with you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks.